I'm Natalie. I'm MSSF Vice President right now, and I'd like to introduce Trent Blizzard, and possibly his wife or partner will be joining later to help with chat. And he's here to give us some intel on how to find morels,
Talk
specifically
for a
burn
minute
morels.
more. Kristen's texting me. I want to try to get her in here.
Okay, yeah. So these guys are amazing. They also wrote a fabulous cookbook in collaboration with lots of other foragers. And I can't remember the name of it. Maybe you could fill that in for me. Your
Um,
cookbook?
it's a Wild Mushrooms, a cookbook and foraging guide. Sorry, I
Yeah.
was trying to get sorted here on the chat.
Yeah. So I recommend that book if you guys don't have it. It's nice because it's recipes by actual people who actually go out in the woods and do or do not find mushrooms. So it's nice to see what they enjoy doing when they do find them. Um, and I don't know if I'm stalling enough. I don't
No,
know
I
any
think
good
I'm good. I think
jokes.
Kristen's in the waiting room, just waiting to be let
Okay,
in.
good, good.
So hopefully
Well,
that'll.
again, on behalf of the MSSF, we really appreciate
Thank
you
you.
being here to share your knowledge. And for folks who don't know, the Modern Forager maps that are available and other tools. I think you have like a cell phone app now, or like at least
Yeah,
accessible on cell phones. Really, really cool. So I hope you'll enjoy his presentation, and I
thanks.
hope you guys will also think about downloading their maps because they're awesome and they do some of the work for us. But I think if you're ready, let's go, Trent.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Trent Blizzard, and today I want to talk about burn morels and how they work, when they fruit, where they fruit, and kind of how you can chase them down. I'm going to spend a fair bit of time looking at maps with you and talking about when and where to go. Hopefully, you all can ask questions in the chat, and we'll try to answer them as we go. Or what's the best way to let people, if they want to verbally ask a question, do we have a procedure for that?
Well, people can raise their hand virtually, and maybe we'll notify you.
Just a second here. I'm putting in a little thing in the chat. If you could send Kristen an invite, uh, that would be great. Thank you. So let me share my screen, and I'll talk a little bit about us and how we got started in all this. And Kristen and I, when we met, we started hunting mushrooms very early on together, and it really kind of was baked into our relationship. And pretty early on, we read about these things called burn morels, and I think at the time it was an article maybe by Langdon Cook in Fungi magazine or somewhere that really talked about it. And we looked it up, and I looked everywhere on the internet, and did a bunch of research on forest fires, and we drove from Colorado out to Oregon, and lo and behold, we had the best time ever hunting burn morels that first year. Like, it must have been 9 years ago. um, and I started doing it every year, and I spent more and more time making maps to decide where we were going to go and expanding the different states we thought we could go to,
I don't
and started sharing those
I don't
maps.
know. It's only from here.
um, so that kind of has morphed over time as I've just really been a student of these mushrooms and tried to learn as much as I can about them, and also I've done a lot of work in maps because I think this is very much an armchair game of burn morels. You can do a lot of research before you hit the field. So I'm going to focus today on California. We might talk about a few other states if people want to. So feel free. Let me see here. Um, All right. I think Kristen is like in the waiting room waiting to be approved, it sounds like. I don't know if anybody can check that out. Okay. So this is some pictures of us. There's our camper, and we have two dogs we take into the woods, and that's a pretty big consideration for us, is how to take dogs out with us in burns. And we've had both of our dogs get hurt in the burns. It can be rough on them running around in them, but they love to go. Now, why burn morels? I think there's some real distinctions here that are big picture distinctions that you can understand. Number one, I like this that there's no secret spots. Like this is a great thing to go online and share with the world because every year the place that these morels grow changes with the burns that happen that year, and in many ways, they're destination hunts. You rarely can pop in your car and drive a half hour and hunt burn morels and drive home. Often it's a multi-hour drive and really best planned even over a couple days to have a full adventure. So we consider them really destination hunts. They can have pretty late seasons. Now in California, that's a little tougher. You know, you have some high elevation burns that could fruit into July and August. But as you go further north and further west, it's very common to have a really good picking in July and August and even into September. Was I muted?
I think temporarily. Sorry, Trent.
Oh, okay, okay. Um, um, there's so many to be found, and it doesn't seem that you're really over harvesting, just kind of the nature of their life cycle. It appears they're always there in the forest and they really need a burn to trigger them. And even if you pick as many as you can haul out, it's kind of humbling because you look around and there's 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 times more out there in the woods. They're just everywhere. Or if you go somewhere where multiple people have been, there's still a lot of mushrooms they miss. So I don't worry too much about that over harvest concept with the mushroom itself. And then finally, they're really predictable. They are slaves to rain and temperature. They prefer certain trees, and as you learn them, you can really increase your odds of going out and finding them successfully. So these are some of the reasons we're attracted to burn morels. Excuse me. Um, to dig a little deeper into what makes them kind of special as, let's say, as a species or as multiple species, they only grow in conifer forests. That really is also only in the West. Now, there are some exceptions, I think, to the conifer forest. You know, occasionally people might find them, rarely outside of it. But I think today we want to talk about the rules, not the exceptions. You know, if somebody did happen to find some nice brim morels under a willow, that's great. But I don't think you can build a strategy around that. You're going to want to focus on conifer forests to find these and be in the western US. There have been some recent finds we've been talking about in our blog and in the eastern US, and they definitely grow there. If you're interested, you can read more about them online, but not in the same numbers they grow out west. And then they only grow after a fire. Now this is a really important distinction. Burn morels, the species that we call burn morels, are very tightly connected to the fire. They really only fruit after fire. And while other morels may also fruit in the vicinity of this, and they may look like they're burn morels, um, those are ones that are maybe disturbance morels that you're seeing, and you really don't see them that often. The vast majority of the morels inside these burns are burn morels, and you're not going to see them outside of the burn, and you're not going to see non-burn morels inside the burn 99% of the time. So these are not, you know, these are also not morels that grow after a campfire or something like that. I'm talking about a forest fire that really does a lot of damage to the trees and the roots and creates the environment that really triggers burn morels to fruit. And they only fruit after that fire. It appears to me that they're hanging out in the soil and in the trees and just living the good life for decades, and then a fire event happens and they get busy, and they ultimately fruit the next spring if conditions are right. Okay. Kristen popped a link in the chat for the Eastern burn morels if anybody is interested in learning more about those. So there are exceptions to these rules, but the rules, you know, these are 99 percenters in terms of rules. I will mention back to the idea they only grow with conifers. We consider burn morels mycorrhizal in the sense they behave that way. We see them really tightly connected to their trees. Now, technically, they may not be mycorrhizal. I think there's a lot of evidence recently of people growing them, certain species of burn morels in gardens. So, they have a complicated lifestyle. Maybe they're sometimes mycorrhizal, sometimes not. I don't know, but for the sake of being a forager, if you pretend they're mycorrhizal, you're going to really increase your odds of success. All right. Looks like we're doing good on the chat. I don't see any pressing questions in there. Now, to continue about their life cycle, these are the 5 species that I'm really considering burn morels. I think this list has evolved. 10 years ago, this would have been a different list, and maybe going into the future with more DNA testing and more research, I wouldn't be surprised if there were a few more burn morel species out there that we consider. However, the first 2, Sextulata and Exemia, are pretty similar to each other. The Brunier is one that really vexes me. I'm not really sure how it works or what it looks like even, but people do report finding those, and especially in iNaturalist. The Exuberans and the Tomentosa. So these first 2, I'm going to just click to that next slide. Here's some pictures of what they might look like. I think these are the ones that pop up earlier, first and second flushes. They tend to have the thinner stems and thinner walls. They're a lighter, less dense mushroom. They take up less space and weigh less in your bag. They're certainly delightful though. And then the Exuberance is a bigger, chunkier guy. And this one is actually found in the eastern burns. When they DNA test those burn morels in the east, there are these Exuberance. They're thicker, have a couple arrows in there. You may note the folds in the stem and some double walls. That's one of their signatures. I always wonder whether they're early or late. I hear different things from different people. I think they might fruit after that first flush, but before the tomentosas, but I think people find them after the tomentosas. So I think the Exuberance may indeed have a more erratic flushing pattern and could be a little early, could be a little late, but it's also a popular one. And then the final one, I think, is the most exciting one, is the Tomentosa. I don't know if these are as popular down here, or I should say as common in California as they are as you head north into Oregon and east into Idaho and Montana and Colorado, where they're very widespread in burns. I think they're a little less common down here, but I understand that they appear. Maybe they prefer slightly higher elevations than some of the others. If anybody has some different information on that, please share. I think in terms of habitats, we know we have hunted a lot in Oregon and Colorado, and we've done quite a few hunts in Idaho and Montana, but not so much in California. So if anybody has something to add in on this, I would certainly appreciate it as we go. But these are the Tomentosas. They're the last one to flush, so they're pretty late fruiters. When we're out in July and August, this is what we're chasing. They're big boys. They're super chunky. They're like double walled on the inside. They weigh a lot. In your mouth, they're just thick and have a real heavy, good, firm kind of texture and mouthfeel. Really a delightful mushroom. And you can see as they change in the upper left, they start darker and often get lighter as they get bigger, but not always. Now, Tomentosa means hairy. And here's a close-up view on the left of, you can see the little hairs coming out of the edge of the mushroom. You see them pretty easily on the stipe. When they're young, you can see them down there, but they seem to have a lot of variation in the color. This one on the right is a big one in our hands. In fact, that's a close-up view right there on the left of that particular mushroom. That I think that mushroom is from Idaho and was found in July. Now, on the left, to the bottom, you can see another picture of a hairy edge of a mushroom, and look how dark that one is. So let me go to the next screen, and you can see on the right some beautiful, just like coal black Mortella tomentosas with the real dark stipe you can see, and you can almost see the fuzz on the stipe in this case. And on the left are some real blondies. These are less common, but I think these are tomentosa too. They just are ones that don't have the same color. When you zoom in and look at the edges of them, they are laden with those hairs. So it's a really probably the signature burn morels of the kind of Western burn are these. We call them grays, we call them fuzzy feet, we call them tomans. We love them. Does anybody know that's in here about their how common they are in Colorado and the Sierra Nevadas, especially where you hunt? I'd be curious if anybody has any thoughts on these particular species and which ones you find here the most. Did I say did I say Colorado instead of California? Sorry. Okay, so that was kind of the morel overview. I think now we want to dive into California a little bit and look at some maps. So I've loaded up our foraging maps here, so I can walk you through and talk about what we're seeing this year in California, and maybe help you develop some strategies of where you might go, especially out of San Francisco. So we have a lot of different base maps we can load behind this. I'm not going to get into that quite yet. I'm going to start here in the wildfires and say that we have 3 years of wildfire data is available to you there, and many people ask how good our second and third year burns, and we get a lot of different answers on that. Some people say they don't do well. We've heard people say that they exclusively hunt second year burns. They love the lack of crowds and they find plenty of mushrooms. I think California kind of has a reputation of second and third year burns producing better than maybe other states. So I think it's well worth your time if you're trying to find some burns to not get just stuck in the 2024 wildfires, right? It's 2025. So we're hunting 2024 fires. You might want to dig down 2 years back and explore some of those older burns and check them out. Let's see. So I'm going to open up 2024 though, and I'm going to turn on the wildfires, and I have California already preset for my list of states here, and I have all of them on, and there's like way too many here. This is a lot of burns, and it's like this every year. So if you pop in here to rank and you pick A, what I've done is I've ranked fires A, B, C, and then there's actually a D, which I don't show you. That's really under the all. And let me talk about the ranking, but let me turn it on here for you. And it's a nice year for people in California, because you have 9 fires that have the right habitat. Some are a little small and some are pretty big. Nothing is crazy huge, but they stretch from north to south. So, you know, from really down there by Bakersfield, you could potentially find some that's pretty far south, but there's also some high elevation in there. We'll talk about those in a sec. You know, right here in the middle of California, you've got 3 burns that you could probably get to out of San Francisco without too much heartache. Now, the other thing worth pointing out is Oregon has fabulous burns this year. And if you really want to chase morels and maybe have more territory to roam around, you might want to come up to Oregon for a couple days and check out some of them up there. Let me see what I've got. So, the A-rated burns. I was going to tell you how I rate those. I look at every burn, and the first sweep I go through, I'm looking for trees. And it's important that a fire have pretty good conifer forest for the morels to fruit out of. So the first thing I need to see is some decent forest. And if you don't, you're going to drop in rankings. The second thing I look for is public land. And in California, many of the fires are not on public land. Like, number one, we don't want to be in suburbs or near people's houses. Not that you would, but you know, I'm talking about Forest Service and BLM land where you can hunt. And we're trying to really note the wildernesses, the national parks, the reservations, places like that where you're not supposed to hunt. And I have some maps to help with that, which I think we'll check out in a minute on public land. So that's required to be an A fire is public land. The third thing that's required is access. So in many of these fires, depending where you are, you can't get into them. There's no roads, and that's tough. Um, uh, so California, that's not as often as big a problem as other states like Idaho, where a fire could be a 5 mile walk to even get into. But it is a consideration. You need to be able to get a car into the fire for it to really be an A-rated fire. The fourth consideration for an A-rated fire is size, and that depends from year to year on what's available. But I don't want to rate like 100-acre fire in A. It's not really big enough. I think the bigger the fire, the better, because it gives you a lot of different habitats to check through and can kind of absorb a fair bit of attention from a number of hunters. So often big fires will be higher rated than smaller fires. Now, if you go look at bees, the thing you might find are there's some really nice bee fires. You will find ones that are small that you have to hike into, maybe a couple miles. If you're a hiker, go to the bees. That you might do really well there. So I do encourage people, don't only do the A's. If you need to drive to a fire and can't hike a ways, though, you'll probably need the A's to really do well. And the B's and the C's can have morels too, but I don't think they're worth driving to. Like you're near a B or a C, I'd say stop, check them out, see how they look. But I would not make a trip to one. I would more like stop while I was driving by. Okay, so you can pick those right here. You can pick A, B, and C pretty easily, which ones you want. I was on all before, but I'm going to stick with A. And it shows you the list here. You can click on one and go to it. But before I do that, let's talk a little more about like what we see here in California. I am going to change the base map. We have quite a few base maps, and I'm just going to pop on a satellite view real quick so we can look at it that way, and you can see how the fires overlay on the forest. And in California, what you see is a really big range from north to south. And obviously, as you go further south, you're going to have earlier seasons, and further north, you're going to have a later season just by that virtue. However, elevation is really ultimately a bigger factor than north or south. The other thing that's interesting about this area is that as you look at the habitats, they tend to run north to south based on their elevation, like if they're a forest habitat or something like that. So I'm going to go back to a street view, and I'm going to close this up. And I just want to show you real quick an example. If I come into our tree layers and I just do a forest type, this just breaks down the forest into 10 or 15 different types across the West, and you'll see several colors running north to south here in that area. So just big picture this what would you call it? Is that lavender, purple? I'm not sure what that light purple color is called. That's just called a California conifer forest, and it has a lot of different species in it. But you're going to see some light browns, which are going to be lodgepole dominated. You're going to see some reds, which are going to be lodgepole pine dominated, and you're going to see some kind of salmony pinkies in here, which are going to be a little more fir dominated. So I'm gonna. It's kind of neat though to like try to understand your habitats based on a general forest type, and if you want to drive deeper into those, beyond like just the real basic forest types, I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to pop in and show you. You can also maybe look at specific trees if you're starting to target different tree types and trying to understand the habitats. You might let's turn on ponderosa. And you can see that's in blue, and you can see how that runs down this western slope of the Sierras pretty heavily. If I turn on, I think white fir is a pretty popular fir tree that's going to run. It looks like at the kind of higher elevations, and I think that fir is going to be one of the trees that the morels especially love. And they're different colors, so you can try to layer them if you want to kind of compare. But you can also slide these opacity sliders down and kind of hide them as well. if you want to try to understand how the trees are working in these zones. And I don't have all the trees in here yet. If somebody asks for a tree, I think I can set it up. Now, down here, what else? Are there any other fun trees? That's probably good enough for the trees. We got Doug firs, which are going to be more to the north, and they taper out as you head south a little more quickly. So, lodgepoles. We didn't look at lodgepoles. Those are going to be more on the other side of the Cascades or the Sierras, it looks like, and kind of at the top and over the edge. All right, so those trees kind of show you how things run north to south, but they also change as you go up and over the mountain and get different elevation ranges. The other fact is, just before we dive into fires here, is to talk about moisture. California is a dry state, and we know that morels are really slaves to moisture. They do best when they've had snowpack. They tend to really Burn morels tend to grow where there's been snow on the ground. And let me rephrase that. They fruit best in places that normally have a snowpack. Now, that's not exclusive, but it's, we're up to the 98% rule here. The more the snow, the more likely you're gonna get burn morels. Now, much of the snowpack has been receding recently. Oh yes, you are hearing frogs in the background. I had to turn the pond waterfall off because it makes the frogs really loud. They're quite nice though. Let's see. So yes, enjoy the frogs in the background. What was I? I was talking about the precipitation, and one thing early on, like now in this part of the season, I'm looking at this snow depth pretty regularly. I'm going to turn the opacity up on that so we can see it a little better. And I pay a lot of attention to that because as I look at these fires, some fires are still up in the snow, so they're not ready to pick. However, when I see that here now, like if you're really making plans, you may want to know like what's under snow right now. Maybe I need to be there in a month. And keep watching these because at some point, whether it's 2, 3, 4 weeks after the snow recedes, the mushrooms will hopefully pop. So as you go down and say, look at this fire down here, which we're going to zoom in on and look at it in a little bit, you can see there's hardly any snow. There's a few spots here. So if you were down here and you it's probably time to go check this fire out. The snow is melting and it could be good. Now, so pay attention to the snow depth. The other thing you can look at is the rain. Since California is so dry, the mushrooms will really respond to some rain. So the best strategy is probably to sit back and watch these and watch where some rain comes after the snow melts. Like if the snow melted and 2 or 3 weeks later, you get a good rain, or you get some steady rains a month later or 6 weeks later. That means it's time to go, and that rain is really going to trigger those mushrooms. So watching the precipitation is good, and this is a good place to like stop for a minute and talk about how I mentioned earlier that burn morels are destination foraging. I think there's something important about that when you go, and if you make a plan now to go in 30 days, you might not want to pick the fire you're going to. You may want to come look at the rain and decide, I'm going to go north, I'm going to go south, I'm going to go to Oregon, and try to go where you've seen some decent rain patterns. Now we have historical rain in here. I have a 2 week, a 3 week, and a 4 week precipitation map too. I'm working on that right now, though. I took it down and I'm tinkering with it to make it more accurate. My legend is not right on it. That's really the problem. So as you prepare to go, pay attention to the rain, and try to keep your plans flexible. Okay, so that was, and I'll just show you real quick. Let's just pop on the last 7 days, bring up the opacity. Let's see what we've had. We've seen these northern fires up east of Sacramento and north have gotten a little bit of rain, not much, Not much rain, but they've gotten some. And these legends are what I'm working on right now. The quantities are difficult, so I'm not sure if they're dead accurate right now. Now, but the maps are pretty nice. They do show pretty cool details on where the rain has happened in the past, so you can pay attention to it. The other thing that's new, it's in beta right now. If you are also trying to track moisture, is going to be this soil moisture map, which is also new and being worked on. But this is a great one for you to pay attention to what the soil moisture levels are and how they're changing, and you might start finding patterns there on what is the right kind of soil moisture. So these tools are all meant to help you as somebody that I assume is like in San Francisco, when you decide which direction you want to go and which fire is worth a visit, you can be watching these snowpacks and then the rain and monitoring the soil temperature and have some intelligence before you burn a tank of gas and go there. Maybe spend a day or two. Okay, let's see. I talked about how important moisture is in California, especially because it's so dry there. This advice is not always true everywhere else, but in your case, when you do get the rain, I think the other bit of wisdom is I think the mushrooms tend to fruit fast and furious and have a shorter window because it dries out more quickly. So if you get some rain and then you get that sunny, dry weather and it starts to dry up pretty quick, the mushrooms seem to compress their life cycles and fruit very, very abundantly, but in shorter windows. So that's another reason to try to stay flexible and go after you see some moisture events happening in California. I did it again. Okay, I think we're doing good on the maps. Yeah, soil temperature. That one I hope is pretty eminent too. That's a fun one. So we're busy building all these overlays. Actually, the hardest part of these overlays are the legends, getting the measurements to match the colors and be inches or percent, um, or whatever they are. It's pretty difficult. So I hope you enjoyed some of these. Now, the final bit as we drive in, as you go into our maps, as we go look at this first fire, I want to point out we have two special features, morel probability and burn severity. So let's just pop down here. Let's go down south first and let's take a look at this fire here. Um, Hopefully everybody's with me here. You can see that okay. I think this is the basil the Morel fire, 92 miles squared. And when you click on it, what you've got in here is you've got all these notes to help you, at least my notes on the fire, including you can see the elevation range is 1755, which is low, to 8200, which is pretty high in elevation. So theoretically, you could get into some fun spots in this as the year progresses. And if you remember, though much of the snowmelt is off this fire, so it's hard to say how long it'll last. It's very far south. I think it's kind of fun that way. Like I like to go to this fire just because it's all the way down to Bakersfield and find bird morels this far south. But if we turn on the burn severity, um, what this does on these fires, let me turn up the opacity a little bit, is it shows you how heavy the burns were. And when you're deciding where to go, that matters. Now, when you get in the fire, you can see this with your own eyes. And normally that high severity, that purple, is a high severity burn. And when you see that, usually that means the trees are completely burnt. They might be sticking up 10, 20 feet in the air, but there's no canopy left on them. And the ground is usually like ashy, like dark gray. There's not a lot of duff on the ground holding moisture. Those are usually the least productive areas. Occasionally, you can do really well on a high severity burn. It does happen. I think it happens farther north. And by farther north, I don't mean Northern California, I mean like Alaska. So in places like that, they have so much moisture that these high severity places, which don't hold moisture and get beat by sun, will actually fruit. We instead want to look at the greens and the yellows and the oranges. And those are going to be indicated by having foliage left in the trees. we call it a mosaic burn when you're in these areas that have living trees and trees that are struggling to live and trees that died all mixed in together. Often the fire runs through here, and in the heavy burn, it burns everything. But in the moderate burn, it runs through and it kills the tree, but it doesn't burn the tree. So the tree is holding a massive amount of brown needles in it that fall to the ground over the next year. And those needles, that duff creates a duff on the forest floor, a brown needly duff that you see in most burn morel pictures, holds a lot of moisture. And usually above the duff is some shade to also help hold the moisture. So we really focus on the orange and the yellow and the green. However, we check the other places out, and this map like this might help you direct some of your attentions on where you want to go. Let me just see how we're doing here. Oh, Natalie, yes, Natalie's asking. We do have a discount code for the MSF members. This package is $49. It has a website, so you can do it like I am right now on your computer in a browser, but it also has an iPhone app and an Android app. The coupon code, if somebody wants to pop it in there, is capital MSSF 2025, 8 characters long. MSSF 2025. It gives you $10 off. This is important though. You got to go on the web version and buy it on the web version. If you do it on your iPhone and you get pulled into the Apple world, that coupon doesn't work in the Apple world. You got to kind of pay for it on the website. If you do it on the Apple world, it's the retail price of $49.99. I can't get that coupon through the Apple payment system. So, but once you get it, you can then look at it on either Android or iPhone app and desktop. It will work on all three once you are a subscriber. There's also a free version if you want to go try that out. It doesn't have all these premium maps. So burn severity is something we pay attention to. The other thing, which is really something we developed, Kristen and I, is this idea of morel probability. And this fire does not have a great morel probability score. It has some yellows and light greens and moderate greens. But it also has a fair bit of low in it. So let's talk about what this is, why we have a morel probability. The problem is when you look at a fire like this without this, and you start driving into the topo map and you look at satellite views and topography views, what you're really trying to figure out is, does it have good thick trees? You want to go to places that have thick trees. So I'm just real quick going to turn on satellite here, and you can see those with your own eyes. And see the red from the fire? It's a little bit obnoxious. You can come in here and just turn the opacity down so you can see the underlying map a little bit easier. And what you're going to focus on as you hit this fire are going to be these green areas wherever you can. Okay, so number one, we want areas with good tree canopy, and we measure the tree canopy on a percentage scale of 0 to 100 for this calculation, this morel probability calculation. Secondly, we increase the score if they're north facing, we lower the score if it's south facing. In dry areas like California, that northern slope can be a much more productive environment with really better trees and holds a lot more moisture. Keep in mind though, if you're on an east or a south, east or west slope, they have a lot of topography in them. And anytime like a little stream runs down a western slope, it's going to have a north side and a south side. So there's a lot of little micro habitats all through the burn, but you want to focus on where as many trees are as possible. At least before you drive in, you want to target those places. So trees are the first thing in morel probability. The second thing in morel probability is north facing versus south facing. The third thing is slope. And this is a steep fire, and I think that's where on this particular fire, if I bring this back and turn it up, there's a lot of bad scoring places, because if we come back to our base map, and let me just pop up CalTopo has real easy lines to see, and we'll zoom in real close, and you can see it's pretty steep in here. Like here's a really nice spot up here. It's 5,200 feet. It looks like it's northwest facing. this whole side, and this ridge line up here has a really nice flat area. Like, I would look at that, and then I might come back and just let's double check that in the satellite view and see if it confirms. Like, I think that was this spot right here, wasn't it? So that does seem to confirm that this area, whoops, wrong map. This area right here could be worth a visit. And the Morel probability factors that in, slope. And the reason it factors in slope is things that are really steep are hard to hunt, and Kristen and I like to avoid them. I will tell you, if you're willing to hunt steeps, the Morels don't seem to mind them. They hold wonderful trees, especially the north-facing slopes. Morels grow on them, but it's exhausting to hunt in. Number one, and number two, it can be dangerous. I would encourage you to stay off those slopes when it's wet, because burns can be very slippery and you can go downhill pretty quick if you're not careful. I would also, on a safety note, encourage you to avoid hunting the burns after a big rain in general due to slippage. Flash floods are probably the most dangerous thing you're going to see in a burn, or maybe it's trees falling. We don't get it. When it's windy or stormy, we get out of a burn because we don't want a tree to fall on us. So safety wise, steeps are also a problem. So the Morel probability gives you a real quick visual indicator of places that you may want to try to focus in on this burn, like maybe in here or these edges down here where you get little bits of light green and yellow. They're going to be places that I would start in. Let's see if we have any questions on that. The Morel probability is geared towards dry terrain. When we look at the fire in the farthest north, that's going to be a little wetter zone, I think, and the Morel probability won't be quite as important from a dryness factor. Okay, so this is the Morel fire. We looked at the Morel probability. The next question you may have, which is important before you go, is, can I hunt this? Is it legal? So to do that, let me just close down a couple of maps here. Let me turn this up a smidge so you can see that burn a little more clearly. And we have some layers to help assist with that. We do have a public access layer. And that is going to be nice because it's going to show you, what's public and what's not. There's a lot of data, so I'll click this and talk for a minute while it loads, and hopefully we'll get it the first time. It's a pretty data intensive map. Here it comes, and there's a lot of green, and the green is going to be your open access. And if you click on it, it will tell you down here in the pop-up what it is. So that place to the left, I clicked over here, is Sequoia National Forest. It tells you all about it, details, and you can go, determine whether you can hunt there. I think if you click like farther south, you might see, oh, still Sequoia National Forest. If you click over here, it's still Sequoia National Forest. So that's kind of nice. This forest is pretty open. Now your job is to know the rules in the Sequoia National Forest and whether you can hunt there. I did look this fire up, and it looks like it is not closed. I didn't see anything on their website indicating that this burn was closed to the public. So that's an interesting one to look at right now. The other question around, let me turn that off for now. We'll come back to some access later. The other question you might have is, can I drive in there? We do have a motor vehicle trail map, which will occur in not all zones because it's provided by the Forest Service. So some Forest Service provide these nice extra maps that have kind of designations on the road and will tell you what they are, like what is that dotted line. That's a special designation for a seasonal road. You can usually then dig into one of our base maps and learn more about that road as well, because we do have in here, I'm going to turn that off. We do have in here several different base maps with roads on them, so you can hopefully figure out how to get into this burn. Let's see. By the way, Wendy asked, do you collect data to validate the Morel probability score year over year? No, Wendy, we don't. That score is completely calculated by an algorithm, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's a pretty rudimentary one based on a few habitat situations. We have tweaked it. I think if I was going to change the score, Wendy, what I might do is in wet areas, I might decrease the importance of southern exposures, and I might try to factor in elevation in some areas because low elevations are often not as good, but lower elevations typically don't have as many good trees either. So that kind of takes care of itself in the algorithm. Burn severity is not in the algorithm, however. So we do not include that, and that's a separate type of calculation. And the burn severity is based on infrared satellite photos of before and after the burn, which can more easily measure the vegetation that is still existing in the tree canopy and the shrubs on the ground. So it's basically a calculation of how much vegetation has been burned away is what the burn severity map does for us. And I make those, and they're called, I didn't invent the algorithm for that. I think it's called a DNVR. It's a pretty standard type of burn severity map calculation that we use to just calculate inside only the like A and B fire perimeters do we do the burn morel probability questions. Fred asked, what are some of the root sources? A lot of them are federal maps when it comes to trees. They're all coming out of the federal government site. Same with the burns. We do pull some state information here and there. We've been struggling this year. Some of the base information has come and gone this season. I think it's a little more regular than in past years. One example is we used to have prescribed burns in here last year, and there was a federal database with thousands of prescribed burns, and that database is not available anymore to us. So it'll be interesting to see how these habitat-based map services stay available to us. I've been trying to get many of them downloaded into my own server so I can pull the data off of my server rather than rely on the federal government's servers in case they change their policies around these maps. So yeah, I'm concerned due to recent budget cuts that this data is not available. I think because it relates to habitat and climate change and that sort of science, that it also wants to disappear. However, much of it is highly relevant to farmers. The precipitation data is really driven by the agricultural industry. So I think that's only getting better. Our new precipitation maps this year come from a website called precip.ai, and they're fabulous precipitation maps. And I'm excited to be rolling those out. Just like today, we released 3 of them. And hopefully tomorrow, the next day, we'll have a few more out on precipitation. The other maps that people care about are the trees, because the logging industry relies on these. So there's a lot. I don't know if you saw in our trees, we have tree canopy percentage and tree stand height and tree stand size, and that is really coming out, I think, mainly for the logging industry, so they can plan where they cut. So I imagine that data is gonna stay there. I'm glad to use it for something like finding mushrooms, though, as opposed to cutting trees. So this fire here has some potential. Now, the last map that I think we need to show here with this fire is I want to bop back to the snow map. And the reason is, just to remind you, the snow is gone. So this is a fire, if you're in the area, you might want to check out. Now, as we go further north, I think we're bopping up to the trout fire up here. And you can see this one is still halfway under snow. And the eastern half does not appear to have snow. So I'm going to turn that off. And I can click on here and we can read about it. It's a 37 square mile burn. 2/3 of it are in the Dome Lake Wilderness, though, so you're going to want to pay attention to that. The elevation range is 6,000 to 9,800, so it's considerably higher elevation than the one we just looked at, hence the snow. Also, a suggestion that might be a place where you'll be going in, not in April, but maybe in May. Due to the current snow and the elevation that's there. We do have a handy map for wilderness here because it's such a thing. Underneath public access, I have the wilderness area map in purple, so you can see here the wilderness that you are not supposed to pick in, then you're going to want to avoid. So that will help you hopefully avoid the public access will show you what's public or not, but the wilderness will help you determine, even though it's public, I shouldn't be picking there because it's not appropriate. Same thing, obviously, with the national park map. This will help you not only avoid national parks, but avoid potentially fat tickets. And you may wonder, like, some of these burns, like, oops, went a little crazy there. Burns that are in national parks might be wonderful, but I have not rated them an A, B, or C. If it's in a national park, it gets rated a D. So now if there's part of it outside the national park, that can be worth exploring. Okay, so that was the trout fire, I think, right here. We were looking at the second one down. So let me go. Oh, this topo map, you see all the black? That's interesting. This map is based on Forest Service data. So all of this black just means it's not part of the Forest Service region, and so they don't have the map there. So if you want to see that, you've got to come back and maybe look at, weirdly, the U.S. Forest Service topo has it, or the Google terrain view will also have a lot of elevation data in it. Okay, so now we're going to pop up to this third Southern California fire that is just east of Fresno. This would be the Basin fire. I don't think it's under snow right now. It's a little lower elevation. I've got some words in there all about it. For some of you, that may be a good one. Now we're getting a little further north. What is this? The shearing fire? Shearing fire. This is a little kind of a baby one. It's only 500 acres. It's got a low elevation range, but it's got some decent forest and some easy terrain. This is one you probably in San Francisco would want to go to a little sooner rather than a little later. That one was, what was that? Was this one just east of Modesto is where that one is. Pretty small fire though. Let's see what's next. Is this, that was the one, the Crozier fire east of Sacramento. This one is also currently not under snow. The snow has melted. A much lower elevation fire, 2590 to 3890, and it has 1,800 acres of forest. I have a hunch probably it's a lot of, ponderosa pine and lower elevation conifers, and oaks, things like that. But I bet you it's worth visiting if you're in the area sooner rather than later. Now, as we head farther north, we're finally up to, what is this? The Mill Fire. This one is totally under snow right now. I think has some good snow. It has 3,000 acres fire with 2,500 of it being in forest. It has pretty gentle slopes. There is public and private land mixed together. I noted one, it's called Gregel land. I don't know what their access rules are. It's not an epic forest, but there are some decent trees sprinkled throughout, and you can zoom in here and put it on satellite view, and you can check that one out. Now we're up to the three northern fires, which probably are the ones that you're most likely to go to, just based out of San Francisco. This next one is Park. Park is going to be a problem child this year. And the reason is when you look at the Park fire, it has a huge elevation range. Let's look at the numbers on it. It's a 250,000 acres of forest in this burn. That's a lot of forest. 200,000 acres of public land.
All the way
the
up
entire burn is nearly 500,000 in acres. I think it's like in the 480,000 acres. However, the problem with it is that it's closed. If you go do a quick search for, what is this? Trying to think, the Lassen. It's there's the national park up there. It's not in there, but it's I think Lassen National Forest. You're going to see that a lot of this fire is closed, and they've got lots of rules out there. So you're going to want to check this one out. The fire closure is, unless it's rescinded, it looks like it's in effect until December of 2025, which is another reason to go look at second-year burns if you don't want to kind of muck around with breaking the law and getting a ticket and being mixed up in all that business. Go look at some second and third-year burns that are now open and see what you can find there. So I want to zoom in on this because if I just want to talk about it. as you look at the elevation of this fire, it goes obviously up in elevation as it goes east and up into the Sierra Nevadas. And this top little, I guess you would call it an arm, is going to be the kind of most compelling area. Now, if we pop in real quick and just look at snowmelt again, just to give us a sense where it's at right now, you can see that whole arm is mostly under snow, and this area down beneath it, probably the snow was there not very long ago. I think it got some pretty good rain. So I think there'll be people down in the lower sections here potentially hunting, again, if it's not against the law. But this section up here is the one that also, let's pop back, and again, I almost always do this first. Real big picture, look at the morel probability, and you can see there's a lot more yellow and lighter grains in this whole section up in here. So this would be the area that you would initially probably focus on. And it is pretty high elevation, and kind of steep in places, but there's also some areas that look flat, the tops of these outside of these canyons. It looks like there's also some accessible area that you could visit. Now, you might want to come back now and pop open. I'll do Caltopo again because I like this, the road maps in here, and you can see this is the state game refuge up here, and it has a lot of roads winding through it. So depending on what you find out with your closures, this whole area is very accessible. It has big flattish areas which will be very easy to walk through. It's got trails cutting through different places, bigger roads, smaller roads, campgrounds. There's a lot going on. This area could be really special this year. It has snow on it now. I'm gonna, if you got a little bit of rain to come through and the second half of April and maybe again in May, this place could really pop. It could be exceptional. All right, we're doing good. We're about an hour in, and I'm getting kind of up near the conclusion here. We have 2 more fires to look at here. Let me make sure I've gotten everything in here we need. Let's see. Yep. So the next fire, let me zoom out. There we go. That was Park. But let me get off of this map because it's hard to tell where you are with that Caltopo map. That Caltopo is wonderful to zoom in to see things close up, but you can't tell where you are. And here we are, northeast of Redding. There's this fire, shoe fire. And the shoe fire is a smaller one. It's going to be a lower elevation burn. It's 5,000 acres though, has a fair bit of public land, but there's some private land mixed in, some timberland like Sierra Pacific, which does look like it allows access. I have a link in there if you want to investigate that for your own a little deeper. It is, but it's low elevation. So, I think right now, if we looked, we'd see, in fact, I did look, there's no snow on it. So this is going to be an early season fire. And then finally over here, we have this fun little fire way to the west. I'm not as familiar with this area. It's pretty close to the coast. However, it's holding snow. Let's go look at that. It's got snow right across the middle, a fair bit of it right now. It got some pretty heavy rain in the last 7 days. I think that area obviously gets more rain. If you come in and let's just read what we have to say about it. It's called the Boise fire. It's a very heavy forest, but it has a lot of steep areas. You're going to want to try to poke around and find some moderate slopes probably. It goes pretty high, 6,000 feet, although that close to the coast. That's not really high. But since it's holding snow, I would think it's going to pick pretty good and be worth a visit. Now, let's look at the acreage. It's a 12,000 acre fire, so it's pretty big, and it's nearly the entire acreage is forest acreage, and nearly all of it, all of it is also public acreage. So it's got a lot going for it right now. I did not check to see if it's open, but I want to show one important California map here. Down here underneath soil, I have this serpentine soil map, which is just for you guys in California. I'm going to zoom out. It's this blue that's up here in Northern California to the west of the I-5 and in Southern Oregon. And this serpentine soil is not conducive to morels. And I would recommend you don't go morel hunting in it. I don't think you're going to do very well. I think if you're driving through the area and looking, you can tell serpentine soil. It's going to have different types of trees and shrubs and be generally, let's say, less prosperous soil. I don't know what the word is for that, but not as healthy for the trees. And the trees will be sparser, but I'm not a geologist. I don't want to get into why serpentine is serpentine. But you can see it touches the edge of this just a little bit. So I think we're okay. We know there's still a lot of great places to hunt in this fire if you do choose to go hunt that fire. Now, that was the last burn. So this is a great time. If anybody has any questions, this is the appropriate time to ask them. We do have that coupon if anybody wants to use the maps. All of this data is available on the internet for free. Well, the burn severity maps and the morel probability maps are not, as well as my ratings, but all this other stuff, I just scurry around the internet and I find sources and I try to bake them into my map in a way that makes them convenient. So if you do want to go find these, you can Google a lot of this and Frankenstein these maps together. However, the other element that we're trying to get out before the season starts, which is, oh my gosh, I think burn morels are going to be found in Oregon here in the next 2 weeks. If I had to guess, it's almost here. Is we need to have an offline feature for you, which I hope to have in a week or two, where people can, where you can use your app and save an area, so that when you're out there in the place with no cell phone coverage, your maps will work. We find ourselves a lot there in the burns in the place with no cell phone coverage. I have a theory that morels and really edible mushrooms in general do not like cell phone signals. I don't know that they're conducive to their growth, because it seems like we do so well in places where our phones don't work at all. The soil, yes, Ali, the soil is unfavorable for morels. So you'll want to avoid that particular serpentine area. Trent, the Trent Blizzard chatting is actually Kristen, in case somebody didn't figure that out. I haven't been typing all that good stuff in there. So she is monitoring and manning the chat. When you go, finally, now that we've gone through the maps, let me give you a few logistic details to think about. Just take a little drink of my water there. Number one is you're going to need a permit in pretty much anywhere you go. Every forest has its own permitting rules, so you're going to have to look up the forest you're visiting and read about what the rules are for mushroom permits. Some are free if you cut them in half. Some will let you pick up certain pounds if you cut them in half. Some you can pay for. Anyone that tells you the rule is wrong unless they ask you what forest you're in, because they can vary from forest to forest. So there is no set rule across the West. And you can buy permits you can read about where to buy them on the Forest Service website for your particular forest. Typically that involves going into a ranger station when they're open Monday through Friday. Hopefully they still have those hours for you now, and you can go in and buy a permit. Occasionally, I've only seen it, I think, in 2 forests so far. You can actually buy them online, which is pretty cool. I don't know if any forests in California have online mushroom permits yet. The one I saw was in Oregon and one in Washington. So if you know that, pop it in there. How long is the discount good for? It expires April 1st. April Fool's Day, so you got a week to decide. So get your permits. Think about safety and comfort. I'll drop a few tips on you for that. Take lots of baskets. If you hit the mother lode, you are going to wish you had more carrying capacity. We have been in the woods. We were out with some friends in Colorado. He brought his 5-gallon bucket. He was ready to go, and we hit a giant flush. And we're all busy picking, and he's filled his bucket, and he's done. I mean, unless he wants to take his pants off and use his pant legs to store them, which I'm sure we have some stories about that floating around in the myco world. So take some good bags and baskets. We like to have ones that don't crush our morels. We like to make it so they're protected with something hard-sided. I really like something I can put on my shoulder. I don't like buckets because they make my arms hurt. And certainly carrying buckets is kind of tough on my kind of keyboard Tyrannosaurus Rex forearms. So I like to have something I can put over my shoulder. I like to carry lots of little extra bags in case we find a lot. I like to take wet wipes, hand cleaners, because your hands will get dirty. There's nothing better than a wet wipe, except maybe a cold beverage, when you get back down from the mountain after chasing burn morels, because you're pretty dirty, and you're even going to maybe wipe stuff off your face because you can get black stuff all over you. And it's nice to have some lotion for your hands. I would recommend that you take somebody with you. I mean, for safety's sake, but look, this is fun. Bring some friends. The more people, the better. Share your mushrooms. They're abundant. Give them away to people. Tell people where you went. My gosh, it's a burn. Send other people there. Introduce your friends to this. Be generous with these burn morels, because they won't be there probably next year. It's a short window. I think you can make the most by being generous with them. Let's see what else we have. Let's see. So walkie-talkies are a great safety device to take into the woods with you. We like to recommend those. You will need to figure out how to dry your morels if you get a lot of them. I recommend you pick clean if you can. If you can certainly wash your morels. We try to pick them where they're not ashy and dirty though, and they taste better too. But hey, if that's all you got, you can pick dirty ones, but you're going to want to probably wash them before you dry them, or later on they might need a wash. But I think that's should you wash morels? My answer is no, but if you have to, you have to. If the situation dictates it, you should. Keep them cool. There are usually not too many bad bugs in morels. The earlier the season is, the more you get bugs, but often morels can be bug-free. Now, sometimes they will have bugs and it will ruin the harvest. I've been fortunate not to have had that happen to me, but I have heard about it happening to people. Let's see, what a little convo about some commercial hunters. Oh yeah, super fast. Big tip: move fast. We like to do our map research. We like to find multiple places to get into the burn, places we want to visit. We drive around. We look for places that have canopy, have shade. That's the places we tend to get out and walk through. We walk really fast. You're going to see these guys. These are not like naturals hidden down in the grass that you're going to miss. When you hit the burn morels, they're going to be everywhere and they're going to be easy to spot. So we move as quick as we can, and we hit a lot of different aspects and elevations and tree types, and we will go again and again and hit in different places until we figure out where they are in that burn. And usually by the end of the first day, we're pretty well into them when we found some spots. But we do plan ahead and go to a lot of different places usually when we're trying to figure out the burn. If you're lucky enough to be near one and you can go regularly, it's a wonderful learning experience. You'll learn a lot about how these morels operate. If you can visit a burn, 3 times a week for 3 weeks, you'll be surprised at all the ebbs and flows that you really get cued into. Do morel glasses work? Man, I have no idea. Does anybody know if morel glasses work? I don't think you need them for these particular guys because they are pretty visible. But I don't know if they work. It's funny. I feel like every webinar somebody asks that question, and I don't know the answer. But people want to know. How long after the snow melt is recommended? Good question. It could be 2 weeks. It could be 4 weeks. It depends how hot and dry it's been after the snow melt. kind of how quickly the soil temp is warming up. We say about morels, people say the 40, 50, 60 rule. You want lows in the 40s, highs in the 60s, and you want the soil temp to be around 50 before they start popping. If you want to, stick thermometers in the soil and measure it, you can look at soil temps. But usually that's 3 weeks after the snow is melted. If I had to pick a number, maybe a little faster in some of your hotter, drier places. Alan says get the golf ball finding glasses. Instead, they are a lot cheaper. Excellent. Although what I really want to hear, Alan, is do they work? Not where to get them cheaper. Yeah, sometimes it'll snow after you pick morels, and they will when the soil temperature drops and comes back up. My experience is they will fruit again, like they think it's the same year. There was a really interesting example in Arizona a couple of years back where they had a spring early-ish fire, and then they had early fall. They had this big cold weather front come through, and I think they had snow. It got really cold, and then they had a couple of weeks of warm weather later in that season. I think by then it was about October, and they had a big morel fruiting in the mountains of Arizona. So they can potentially fruit the same year of the fire, but that situation with cold weather and then warm weather that same year is very unusual and hard to replicate. You're always looking at last year's burns. All right. Any other tests, questions? Oh yeah. Thank you. Logging morels fit into this general picture. I think disturbance morels or loggers, whatever you want to call them. I think they're often Morchella snyderi in Northern California. I think they like Doug firs and true fir forests, and we do have logging maps. And logging areas can be good for several years, up to, I have 5 years here because I think you might want 5 years of logging data. This might help you if you're looking to maybe not go to a burn, but go to another place that could really have morels, would be to look at some of these logging zones. We really like to go log morel hunting. It's fun. The forests are clean. They're easy to walk through. They happen before the burns, though. So right about now, like April, it feels like April is for disturbance or logging morels, and May is when you switch to burn morels, and then June and July is when you go up in elevation. You get those gray burn morels. All right. We do have a recording. We heard earlier on it's going to go on the YouTube channel, I think. So MSSF should make that available to you. Should we wrap this? We have another question. Prescribed burns. Yeah, there's no data on them this year that I could find. You can find it, but you have to dig into individual forest units that you want to go to. So you have to dig into the BLM and all the announcements that they make around last year's burns. It's a lot of work. Any sort of database that I was able to cobble together in previous years, I was not able to put together this year, which I'm really disappointed about. Prescribed burns are just as good if they're in the right habitat. You should be able to find morels and prescribed burns. Often they're not in the right habitat because they're burning, the different type of forest that is less fire sensitive, and I'm thinking like ponderosa pine forests. So often they're in that, but if they get into that little more mixed pine forest or mixed conifer, they're wonderful. All right. Well, thanks everybody. And you have our contacts. If you have any questions, let us know. And you guys have been pretty good. Nobody asked any verbal questions, but it looks like the chat was nice. So good night, everybody.
Thank you, Trent. Good night.